Hello, everybody. This is Drew Pearson. And today I want to report to you on what I think is the biggest story in the nation, keeping a watch on the capital of the United States. Now, you may not consider it such an important story at first, but I think it is, because this is your capital. Your forefathers built it, paid for it, and it belongs to you. It doesn't belong to the congressmen who have offices up there. They come and go. They're elected and defeated depending on whether you want them to stay. They work for you. You pay for them. And if they don't do a good job, you can get rid of them. And the Supreme Court judges who work in this beautiful building across the park from the Capitol, they also work for you. They interpret the laws for you, the laws which your congressmen pass. They not only work for you, but in a very real sense, they depend on you, because even our Supreme Court keeps an ear to the ground of public reaction. And of course, the White House, which I regard as one of the most beautiful buildings in the world, also belongs to you. I always get a thrill when I walk by and look at its stately simplicity. You can go in that building any time you're in Washington, any day except Sunday, because it belongs to you. Now, I don't know of any country except England and the British Dominions where people can be so close to their government, such a part of it. And I say this as a newspaper man who makes it his job to watch the government and criticize it when necessary. I think I know what I'm talking about when I say that, on the whole, it's a good government. But the only way to keep it clean and good is by watching it. You, the American citizen and voter, have to be alert. You have to watch these servants of yours in Washington, because they're only human. And in a minute, I'll be back to point out some of the ways you need to watch them. Now, to have good government, you have to scrutinize the people you pick for government, the people you vote for, both before and after election. I think few other countries in the world these days, outside of Western Europe, the British Empire, and some Latin American nations, have the free elections that we enjoy. So it isn't enough for us merely to go to the polls to vote. We have to know who and what we're voting for. Now, one of the big things to watch in any election is who puts up the money for a political campaign. Where does it come from? Does it come from big business, from labor, from people who want ambassadorships, or from whom? Now, most people who give large amounts of money to a political party, whether it be the Republicans or the Democrats, want something in return. And it takes a lot of money to run a national election. About $23 million was spent in '52. The Democrats going in the hole, nearly $1 million. The Republicans had an easier time because Eisenhower seemed sure to win, and everyone likes to bet on the winner. The winner, of course, can hand out the political plums that the government controls when the election is over. So let's take a look at how it works. Now, here is one example involving one of the wealthiest families in the nation, the Rockefellers. They gave $85,000 to the Republican campaign in '52, and since it's illegal for one man to give more than $5,000, here is how they worked it. The members of the family split their gifts up. John D. and his wife each gave $3,000 to the Republican Committee, the Republican Senate Committee, and the United Republican Committee of New York. That way, each was able to give $12,000, yet stay inside the $5,000 limit by dividing up his campaign contributions. And each member of the Rockefeller family followed the same technique. They gave $12,000 apiece to 3 different committees: John D. III, Lawrence, David, Winthrop, and Nelson. Grand total $85,000. Now, what did the Rockefellers get in return for that $85,000? 2 things. Their cousin and uncle, Winthrop Aldrich, became ambassador to England, the top diplomatic post that we have. Second, Nelson Rockefeller became a White House aide. However, in all fairness, I think I ought to report that Winthrop Aldrich has done a very good job as ambassador in London, while Nelson was one of the best men around Eisenhower. So in this case, the American public lost nothing. In fact, I think they got two pretty good men. Now, here is another case, a very interesting one. One heavy contributor to all political campaigns, nearly all of us, has been the big liquor companies. And in 48, Seagram's Distillers split $50,000 between the Republicans and the Democrats. While in 54, Ellis Slater, vice president of Seagram's, gave $2,500. His wife gave $3,000, all to the Republicans. Nelson Slater gave $1,000, while Jay Gould, another Seagram's executive, gave $2,500. Now, what did these Seagram's executives get in return? They got one of the prized unexplored oil concessions in the USA, the Lacassine Wildlife Refuge in Louisiana. Hitherto, almost no oil drilling has been permitted in wildlife refuges. They're set aside under an act of Congress for the preservation of our rapidly disappearing birds and wild animals. And in previous administrations, almost no drilling permits had been given in these preserves during the entire 50 years of their history. But when General Frank Schwengel, head of Seagram's, went to Washington and called on the Secretary of the Interior, Douglas McKay, his Frankfurt Oil Company, a wholly owned Seagram's subsidiary, was given a permit to drill oil on the Lacassine Wildlife Refuge, one of the most important bird refuges in the nation. Well, those are the contributions on the Republican side. Now let's take a look at contributions on the Democratic side. Most of the big Democratic contributions of the past have come from labor. Not many big businessmen seem to contribute to the Democrats. And after John L. Lewis contributed $250,000 to Roosevelt's campaign in 36, labor has been required to earmark any money collected from union members for political purposes. In other words, political money has to be given freely, separately, kept in a separate account from regular union dues. Now, these political labor funds must be open to public scrutiny and for the most part have been very carefully spent. But here is one strange case where a big Ohio banker, Cyrus Eaton, contributed $35,000, believe it or not, to John L. Lewis's Labor's Nonpartisan League. Eaton, one of the biggest bankers in the Middle West, wanted to fight against Senator Taft, but he didn't want to do it publicly. So he contributed through John L. Lewis. And here, step by step, is what he did. He deposited $5,000 in the bank account of his son, Cyrus Eaton Jr., and he put another $5,000 in the account of an employee, John A. Cruz, then $2,500 more in the account of Dorothy Workrall, another employee. Then these three gave their checks to John L. Lewis's Labor's Nonpartisan League. On top of this, 5 other employees of Otis & Company, Eaton's banking firm, contributed to John L. Lewis's group, so the total amount from Cyrus Eaton, directly or indirectly, was $35,000. Well, that was one of the few times that I've ever been able to ferret out when a banker contributed to a powerful labor leader. Now, here are more hidden contributions. Contributions that influence the type of men you send to Washington. In the files of the Senate committee that's investigating lobbying is a secret check, one of the most important in Washington. It's never been made public, and the senators don't know exactly what to do with it. It's so hot, it's almost burning a hole in their files. However, I've been able to obtain a photostat of this check. Here it is. Don't ask me how I got it. But this check is the real reason why President Eisenhower vetoed the natural gas bill. Also very important, it illustrates the evil of big campaign funds. The fact that when a big businessman gives big money to either political party, he expects to get something in return. This check is from H.B. Keck of the Superior Oil Company, the same Keck and the same Superior Oil that offered $2,500 to Senator Case of South Dakota to influence his vote on the natural gas bill. Senator Case turned the $2,500 down. But this check, for twice that amount, was accepted by the Eisenhower Dinner Committee on January 10, 1956, right in the middle of the Senate gas debate. Senator Case refused his $2,500 and exposed the whole matter in the Senate. But this check for $5,000 from the same man, H.B. Keck, National City Bank of Houston, was accepted at exactly the same time during the gas debate, and nobody has said a single word about it. Superior Oil was indicted for offering the $2,500 to Senator Case, but nobody has been indicted for either offering or accepting. the $5,000 retained by the Eisenhower Dinner Committee. In fact, they haven't even made this check public. Well, that illustrates how important it is that you watch campaign contributions. The man who gives big money usually wants something big in return, whether it be legislation for higher rates on natural gas or lower taxes, or an ambassadorship or a big government contract, or an oil drilling permit in a wildlife refuge. I'll be back in just a minute. You know, of course, that campaign contributions are supposed to be registered for public inspection with the clerk of the House and the Senate, but this is not always done. A great many contributions are given in cash and given secretly. It's a hard job to ferret them out. But in my long experience in watching your government, I'm convinced that big money can be one of the worst influences for corruption, for favoritism, and for bad government. So if you learn of any secret contributions, write me, or write the Justice Department. Remember, this is your government. It's your capital. It belongs to you, and you can't loaf on the job of being a citizen. If you want lower taxes, if you want more efficient government, you have to watch your government servants, and especially you have to elect good men to be those servants. That is the real key to making democracy live.